Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. So, um, this week the other guest was unavailable, so we're going to have continuation of Surah Yusuf, which is good because it's a story. Sometimes we forget what happened. So, if you remember last week, where we were was Yusuf is being seduced by the wife of the Aziz, or Potiphar, from the Bible. And when he tried to run away, she grabbed him from behind and his shirt got ripped. So somebody from her family said, let's go and check to see if his shirt is ripped from the back or if it's ripped from the front. So this is where we were, and we're on verse 28. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فلما رأى قميصه قد من دبر قال إنه من كيدكن. He says, so when he saw, he referring to the Aziz, so when he saw that his shirt was ripped from behind, he said, this is definitely one of your plots, basically. So he basically got upset. Imagine this is a husband whose wife is cheating on him with the servant who's living inside the house, right? And he knows Yusuf is a good-looking guy, he's a nice guy, and she's alone with him for a lot of time. So he gets upset, and the language that he uses is, this is one of your tricks, basically. But if you look at the Arabic carefully, he says, min kaydi kun. Kun means plural. So he's not only talking to his wife, he's getting upset about all women. And he's saying, you know what, you women, man, I don't know what's with you. You guys have all these plots and plans and everything. So he's going and unleashing, his frustration against everyone. Inna kaydakunna azim. Indeed, your plots or your guile, your tricks are indeed great. So what this means is, up until this point, you have the Aziz just comes home and finds out that his wife is after Yusuf, and Yusuf tries to run away. She accuses him falsely, and he is acquitted because they see that the shirt was ripped from the back, and they realized, hey, this guy is telling the truth and the wife is lying. Now, this is really interesting. Because what you have in the Bible is the exact opposite. Okay, so in the Bible, what you have instead is in Genesis chapter 39, verse 19. He says, when his master heard the story, his wife told him, she said, this is how your slave treated me. What does it say in the Bible? He burned with anger. He was really upset. Right? He was very mad. And Joseph's master took him and put him in prison where all the king's prisoners are. What is the Quran saying? Completely different story. He did not believe. He had evidence. He acquitted Yusuf, and he knew that Yusuf is not guilty. What did he do instead? He got upset at his wife because she was the one who's... So Yusuf was not guilty in the Quran, in the eyes of Aziz. In the Bible, that part has been changed. Okay, so it's important to keep that in mind. Next verse. What does he say? What does he say to Yusuf now? So first he speaks to his wife, and he says, this is all a trick you played up. You lied about it. How could you do that? I mean, just think about this. Number one, your wife is cheating on you. Number two, she's lying to you. Number three, somebody is a noble person, an honorable person, somebody you care about, somebody you respect. So this is the first part is bad enough. Then he goes to Yusuf and he tells Yusuf, a'rid an hadha. Yusuf, just leave this. Like let's not make this into a big deal. Let's just stop. Then he turns back to her, wastaghfiri li dhanbik, and you should ask forgiveness for your fault, for your mistake. Innaki kunti minal khati'in. You were one of the people who were mistaken. You were one of the people who did something wrong. So if Yusuf was guilty What do you think would have happened to him? Hmm? He'd been executed, or he's going to be tortured, or he's going to be put in prison or something. Now, if the wife is guilty, which she is, what's going to happen to her? Just slap on the wrist. Right? Nothing. Why? High class society. Right? This is what happens in many societies. Right? Egyptian society was similar. Is that if someone from the upper class is guilty, very minimal punishment. Someone from the lower classes is guilty, it's going to be different. You see, in Islam, it's not like that. We don't have these type of class divisions or something like that. This is one of the complaints that people have about, you know, somebody's trying to implement Sharia in some country somewhere or somewhere like that. They say, but there's one standard for the upper class and there's a different standard for another class. It's not the way it's supposed to be. The standards are the same. So this is the way it was. And then he says, وقال نسوة في المدينة امرأة العزيز تراود فتاها عن نفسه. And the women in the city, they said, the wife of the chief of the Aziz, she wants to get her servant she wants to seduce her servant. She is قد شغفها حبا. She's madly in love with him. You see, so what's happening now? Now there's a bunch of gossip going on in the city, and the women are gossiping about. Man, did you hear the story? Did you hear what happened about the wife of Aziz? Look what she tried to do and all that. So now all the women are getting involved, and for them this is a huge problem because there's a classism in society. She's saying, look at this woman from an upper class. She's fallen in love with this lower class guy. So what's going on here? How could something like this happen? She must be madly in love. She's not even thinking straight anymore. Inna lanaraha fi dhalalin mubin. We see her to be in clear error. Right? She's mistaken. Why would somebody from upper class be in love and completely blinded by someone from the lower class? And this is, this is part of the issue with hub, right? This idea of love is that people once they fall in love with someone, they become blinded. And once they're blinded, they're not thinking straight anymore. So sometimes they do things even they know they shouldn't be doing, but they're just almost like they're not in control anymore, almost like they're intoxicated. And that's why it's very important, that when we talk about uh, when we look at somebody and we feel some level of attraction, it's important to look away, to avert our gaze. When we're speaking with somebody and we're attracted to them, what should we do? We should keep those boundaries. We should keep those limits and those barriers that Islam has taught us to do, to put. Because if we don't, what ends up happening? The person becomes completely engrossed in that. It's almost like a sense of intoxication. They're not going to be thinking straight, and they're going to do things without fully being functional. And this is what's happening to this woman, the wife of the Aziz. فلما سمعت بمكرهن أرسلت إليهن وأعتدت لهن متكئا وآتت كل واحدة منهن سكينا. He says, so when the wife of Aziz heard about all this talk going on, they heard about all this gossip that was happening in the city, she called them. She says, you know what? Okay, arsalat ilayhinna. She's like, I want you all to come over. So she invites all of them over for, maybe a lunch or something like that, a luncheon. وَأَعْتَدَتْ لَهُنَّ مُتَّكَأً. And she basically prepared like a nice feast for them. So she invites them over, says, I want to bring you over for a party. But she has an ulterior motive. She has an agenda. She's a smart woman as well. So, and then she gives each and every single one of them a knife. Now again, why would you give your guests a knife? Is that normal? Like all of a sudden you're like, hey, everyone comes to a party, you take out a bunch of knives and you give it to them. There's only one reason why you do that. It's not a pocket knife. What kind of knife you think that she's giving them? A steak knife? It could be a steak knife. It's a food knife, maybe for the fruits, maybe for steak, perhaps, but probably for fruits, right? And what happens is if you cut it yourself, that's probably part of the culture. Many restaurants nowadays, um, they have like do it yourself. There's actually like a barbecue place, right? This Icon barbecue place in Irvine. You cook the food yourself, right? I heard the first time I heard about this, I'm like, don't you go to a restaurant so they cook it for you? You gotta cook it yourself and then you pay for it. But it's like a new type of trendy thing, right? Like sometimes you do some part of the preparation yourself. So probably what the culture was, and this is mentioned in the Bible as well. The culture was that you know you get served fruits, everyone gets their knife, you cut it yourself rather than the host cutting it for you. And I don't know, there's some novelty to that, right? So she gives everyone a knife and she's serving them food, and they have a knife in their hand and they're probably cutting their fruits. And right at that moment, right, she knew exactly the right moment where she says, oh, everybody, eat your fruits, let's start cutting and everything. وقالت اخرج عليهن. So that's when she called Yusuf. Well, Yusuf's hiding in the back. No one knows exactly what he's doing. And all of a sudden she calls him and said, hey, we need something. So as soon as he appeared, now what happens? فَلَمَّا رَأَيْنَهُ أَكْبَرْنَهُ وَقَطَّعْنَ أَيْدِيَهُنَّ. So he says, once he appeared and he shows up, they magnified him. Like they considered, like they were shocked. The women were shocked by how amazing this guy was, because the way he looks, and it's not just physical look, by the way. Sometimes the way we look at it is like it was all about beauty. It's not just about beauty. It's his presence. When someone has a very nice countenance, their behavior is nice, the way they carry themselves, it has a different effect. So it's not just physically looking nice. They can just see something special about this person in the way that he behaves and all that. So they were shocked, and they just saw the way that he was behaving and the way that he carries himself. وَقَطَّعْنَ أَيْدِيَهُنَّ. And they cut their hands, right? So they cut their hands accidentally. It's not like they're like, oh my God, he's so beautiful, and they stab their hand. I can't take this anymore. They were cutting their fruits, probably, or whatever they were cutting, and they got so distracted looking at him that they end up cutting themselves, at least some of them. So they realized that they were so distracted just by looking at Yusuf. So what is she trying to prove to them? She's trying to prove to them that, look, you got so distracted just by looking at him at the first time. I'm living with this guy. Look how difficult it is for me. You're blaming me. You're gossiping about me. You're talking about me. And you don't even know what it's like living with such an amazing person like this. So she wanted to clarify that. وَقُلْنَا حَاشَ لِلَّهِ مَا هَذَا بَشَرًا إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا مَلَكٌ كَرِيمٌ. And they said, this guy, like, we don't know how to explain. This guy is like nothing, but this guy is not human. He's like an angel. Like, that's how surprised and how impressed they were with him. So she responds, قالت فذلكن الذي لمتنني فيه. She says, this is the guy that you were blaming me about. Right? You were criticizing me about being attracted to this guy. Now do you understand? وَلَقَدْ رَاوَدْتُهُ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ فَاسْتَعْصَمْ. He says, yeah, it's true. This is the guy that I tried to seduce. Right? And he didn't go for it. وَلَئِن لَمْ يَفْعَلْ مَا آمُرُهُ لَيُسْجَنَنَّ وَلَيَكُونًا مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. He says, but do you see, like, basically she has her affirmation now. She wanted confirmation that she's not crazy. She wanted confirmation that she's not the only one who's thinking this. This guy is something amazing and something special. So what's her response? Her response is, if in her mind, she's saying, now that I know, I'm not just blinded by love only, but actually, look, all these other women can realize this guy is something amazing. Like, it's not subjective anymore. It is objective. So now she says, now that I have this 100% clear confirmation, and you understand, and this gossiping is going to stop, because again, the gossip in society should be enough, especially in a shame-based society. It usually puts people in check. People don't want to be involved in some kind of scandal or something like that. So usually that's sufficient. But now she realizes, okay, these women are on my side. They realize, they understand what I'm going through and all that. Says now he's going to do exactly what I tell him to do. Like, now he's going to respond to me. And if he doesn't, he'll be put in prison. Like he's gonna suffer the consequences. He's gonna suffer the penalty. وَلَيَكُونَ مِنَ الصَّاغِرِينَ. And he'll be in a lower state. He's gonna be despised. That's interesting if you look at the contrast here, by the way. So those of you who realize Arabic, if you go back, when Yusuf came out uh, to the women for the first time, what does it say? Akbarnahu. Right? They magnified him from the word kabir. And now what is she saying? That, you know what, even though he's in this state, he will be min as-saghirin, from the word saghir. The opposites. So you have this contrast within wording taking place. We don't really have, this is a very basic tafsir session. So we're not going to get into so many of these linguistics, but if you pay attention and you're following along with the Arabic, I'll point out some things here and there regarding this. So she's basically putting him now in a position. Says, yeah, you got off the first time. Now I have these women who are supporting me. They understand what I'm going through. They're high class society. They're going to cover for me as well. Now this guy's going to have a relationship with me. So she's not done with him. She was already caught. She was guilty from her husband, but she didn't give up. She just continued going again and again. So now what happens? The story kind of shifts, right? So if you notice in the story, there's a lot of gaps. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just quickly passes like a few frames, a few parts of the story, and then just moves to the next part. So what happens here? Next verse is قَالَ رَبِّ السِّجْنُ أَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِمَّا يَدْعُونَنِي إِلَيْهِ. So he said, meaning Yusuf, said, my Lord, well, he's calling out to Allah, oh Allah, prison is better for me than what they're calling me to do. Okay? Now, يَدْعُونَنِي إِلَيْهِ. Yad'una is plural. What they are calling me to do. Who's calling him? It's just the wife. But now he realizes that the wife has support of all these other women. So now it's not just the one thing. Now it's like everyone else is going and telling Yusuf, you know what? You're a good looking guy. You're in the house and everything. She's what? You have to keep this a secret, but you know what? You need to have a relationship with her, or however they did it. They probably had their own style and their own way of doing things. They had tact, right? You have to be tactful when you're trying to do these type of things. So using their tact, they went and tried to convince him, hey, it's going to be okay. Aziz will not find out. Don't worry about it. The minister won't have any problem with it. And Yusuf resists. So what is his response? He says, I prefer prison. And who is he telling this to? Did he tell this to the woman? I'd rather go to prison. Who's he telling it to? He's telling it to Allah. He's complaining to Allah. Sometimes when we speak and we're put in a difficult situation, we want to go and tell the person, you know what? I don't care what you're asking me to do. I'd rather go to prison. What is Yusuf doing? Quiet there, but then in his private time, he goes and he's calling on Allah. Oh Allah, the thing that they're asking me to do, there's so much pressure on me right now. He's asking Allah, oh Allah, help me out of this situation. But if I have to choose, I'd rather go to prison if this is what I have to do, because situation is very difficult for me. And Yusuf is being tempted. So basically what he's telling Allah, this temptation is getting so high. It already said when she tried to seduce him the first time, right? He would have been inclined towards her. And he was a little bit inclined towards her anyway. She's a good-looking woman, noble woman, honorable woman. She's an intelligent woman too, as you can see. She's smart. She convinced all these other women on board. She planned the entire thing. So she's smart as well. It's very difficult for him. So he's saying basically it's to the point now where I am getting myself in danger. I'd rather go to prison. And this is the characteristic of a believer. Right? A believer should understand that once you get to a point where a situation becomes so difficult for you that you're so tempted to fall into something that's haram, you're looking for some kind of out. And even if the way to get out of that is going to be extremely difficult, you go with that because you don't want to fall into sin. This is the thing. We're all going to be tested in different ways. And sometimes the test will become so difficult and so hard, you say, I can't. It's very hard for me to bear this. So I'm willing to suffer physically or financially or in some other capacity. I'm willing to go through some suffering so that I can get out of this because the temptation is getting too much for me. And that's understandable. That's exactly what Prophet Yusuf said. I'd rather go to prison than be here and living in this temptation all the time. So this is what he says. وإلا وإلا تصرف عني كيدهن أصب إليهن وأكن من الجاهلين. And then he says, and if you don't turn their plot away from me, I will start inclining towards them and become one of the jahilin, become one of the ignorant people. So whenever someone commits a mistake, the way that it's being referred to is that it's done out of ignorance, especially for somebody like Yusuf. Well, he's going to be a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Yusuf, who is a noble person, he's doing something wrong, it's described as a type of ignorance because he's doing it. He's not trying to go against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's two types of sins. You say, I don't care what is right and wrong. I'm going to do this anyways. That's one type of sin. There's a second type of sin that says, you know what? I don't want to do anything that is wrong. I don't want to do anything that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then you slowly get stuck into the temptation. The temptation goes into your mind. You think about it. And then all of a sudden you slip. The difference between intentionally going and doing something wrong and not even feeling any shame about it and slipping. Even though you didn't intend to, you somehow got sucked into it. There are two different types of sins. So if the sin would take place, it would be among the second category. Right? So Prophet Yusuf is saying that, you know what, oh Allah, I'm going to start leaning towards this. I need to get out of this. You need to help me somehow. So this is an important lesson, is that this idea that's called in Sharia, it's called Saddu Dhari'ah. Saddu Dhari'ah means you close the door or the means, you block the means to something so that you don't get stuck into it. So if you look at Allah in Islam, Allah has forbidden alcohol. Why is Allah forbidden? What's the problem with alcohol? What does it do to you? It takes away your mind, gets you intoxicated. If you drink one sip, can you get intoxicated? How many people can get intoxicated from one sip of beer? Almost no one. Almost nobody. Is one sip halal? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden that. So one of them is haram lidhatihi, meaning it's intrinsically haram, drinking alcohol to get intoxicated. The second one is haram li ghayrihi. It's extrinsically haram. It's extrinsically prohibited, which means that it's forbidden for a different reason, not because it causes something specifically like intoxication, but because it's a means, it's a wasila that's going to result in you getting into the haram li dhatihi, the intrinsically forbidden category. Right? And that's what we find in Islam. We find that this cutting off of the means that's going to get you somewhere, it's very important. It's there when it comes to riba. Certain transactions have a level of gharar, a level of uncertainty in them, and they start getting you close towards riba. We have certain types of interactions. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. Don't go near zina. Don't go near adultery or fornication. You block the means for that. So your gender interaction guidelines that you're supposed to be following blocks the means from getting you into doing something like that. So likewise, we have the same principle, is that Prophet Yusuf now is basically saying this temptation is getting too much for me because I'm in the area where I'm getting tempted. And Islam has come and taken some of those things and says, we're going to even forbid those areas for you so that you don't get, because once you start to get tempted, you just keep going. It's very hard to stop. Right? So this is how it works generally. This is the way human beings are. And this is a mistake that many people make. Many people make the mistake and they say, no, it's okay. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be tough this time, So if you used to, go to, I don't know, you used to go to nightclubs, and then all of a sudden you have a company meeting inside a nightclub and you say, oh, I'm just going for the company. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to eat dinner. And, I don't know if you don't eat dinner in a nightclub, but I'm just going to go and have like a Coke or something, and then I'm going to leave. The thing is, even going anywhere near that area, when you know that it's tempting for you, you should even avoid that area. And that's something very important. If you want to protect yourself, you avoid those gray areas, because once you get close, it's very easy to just fall over. And that's something that we're learning from Prophet Yusuf. And he says, فَاسْتَجَابَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ فَصَرَفَ عَنْهُ كَيْدَهُنْ. There, then his Lord, meaning Allah, his Lord accepted his dua, and he turned away their plot from him. Basically means that Allah answered the dua of Prophet Yusuf, and he saved him and protected him. Innahu huwa sami'ul alim. So look what's being said. He is the hearing, the knowing. So Prophet Yusuf is making dua, oh Allah, get me out of this situation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and we helped Yusuf. How did we help Yusuf? All right, let's take a look. ثم بدا لهم من بعد ما رأوا الآيات ليسجننه حتى حين. Then it occurred to them, after they had seen all the signs, that they have to put him in prison for some time. حتى حين. So basically, it doesn't say the details. It doesn't say anything that happened. It just says that, you know what? Yusuf had to go to prison. They decided. Who decided? Right? Who decides he went to prison? Well, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is deciding. But second of all, the Aziz somehow realized, noticed all the signs of what's going on. Somehow Yusuf probably told him, look, I'm being tempted, I'm being tested. What does the Aziz do? First of all, Yusuf is the innocent one here. His wife is the guilty one here. What happens to Yusuf? Innocent person is going to be put in jail. And you look at that and you say, this is unjust. How can look at from a societal perspective? This is unjust. This is the worst thing that could happen. You are being falsely accused, and once it becomes clear and you tell everyone, you get punished, and the person who was doing who had the problem, no punishment. No, not even a slap on the wrist, nothing. No major problem at all. But what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying? Allah is saying, we answered the dua of Yusuf and we saved him. Look, a world of difference. He's going to prison, and Allah is saying, we saved you. We saved you from this by putting you in prison. That's a what's the word that they call it? That's like a complete change in worldview, right? That you flip the entire way of looking at the situation. And that's what Allah is trying to teach the believers. He's trying to explain to them is that the way in which you view the world, it's not going to be just cause and effect. It's not just success and justice or social justice in this life. It's not just about you not being wronged or being right, or people saying this about you, or you being harmed. All of these things, it's not that. There's a greater cause over all of these things, and we have to look at it from that perspective. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides, puts him in prison. The Aziz puts him in prison. So now he's in prison, and he says, وَدَخَلَ مَعَهُ السِّجْنَ فَتَيَانِ. So fast forward, it says, and two young men entered prison along with him. And then we're going to stop there. So if you look at the whole story, what's happening? Yusuf, this whole temptation, everything, he's the innocent person. He's trying to resist. He finally is so difficult for him, he can't take it anymore. He asks Allah for an out. He asks Allah for a makhraj, right? وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Whoever shows taqwa, whoever is conscious of Allah, whoever is mindful of Allah, Allah is going to give them a makhraj, a way out. Sometimes the way out is painful. The way out, he's out of his situation. But the way out for Yusuf is the way into prison. It's not easy. Exactly. Like the brother said, you may dislike something, but it's good for you. You may like something, that's bad for you. So this is the way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you a way out, but this is where it's very important for us to look at our own lives in detail. Because if you were looking back at your life, and this was happening to you, and you were living in the moment, you have to ask yourself a question. Would you consider prison to be the answer to your du'as? It'd be a very difficult thing to say, yeah, I'm so happy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has saved me from living in a nice, comfortable household and got me out of temptation. And alhamdulillah, thank you Allah for putting me in prison. How many people are going to thank Allah for putting them in prison? Very few, right? That's what a believer is supposed to be doing. Because when you look back and you realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has saved you from this and put you in this, and it says hatta heen. It's not permanent life sentence. This is going to be for a time. And Yusuf realized that. So you realize that if Allah puts you from one situation, saves you from a difficult situation, but puts you in another difficult situation, look at that and say, well, maybe this situation that's difficult for me right now, maybe this is better for me. Number one, it's going to be temporary. And number two, it's safer for me than this situation that I was in previously. When we have that mentality, it's going to be a lot easier to understand our own lives and the Islamic worldview when it comes to those things. So we'll leave it at that, inshallah. Open it up to a few questions. Anyone has questions? So when I don't mention the Bible, there's no questions. That's good. Quran part is clear. Okay, inshallah, we'll leave it at that. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nastaghfirukallah wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right, next Sunday, Fajr is 5:15. 5:15.